mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, peace, everybody. Welcome back to I Mix What I Like, right here at I Mix What I Like. I am Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Please do come on in. Let me get everything set up here real quick. And find out where is the feedback coming from. But as folks come on in, please do like, share, subscribe, and support the platform however you see fit, as I try to figure out what is going on here. All right, maybe that was it there. All right. Anyway, good morning, everybody. Welcome to those who will see and hear this later. Peace, welcome to you as well. Do all the same things, support the platform. And I do need to put the, I do want to put the Patreon QR code back up. So if you would, please sign up over there as well, just as a backup, just in case. Feel free to support if you like, but you can sign up for free and get early and exclusive content, in addition to just helping have a backup spot, just in case YouTube decides to do its thing. You never know. We are going to get to, I'm going to get to the part 2 of the Winnie series in a few minutes, and go through the remaining episodes that I've now seen and offer up some thoughts and a couple of clips even. But I am going to get to something else first, a story somewhat, I don't know if breaking is appropriate, but ongoing. It's definitely ongoing. And I thought I might even have a guest, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen for today, at least. But it's just something that an ongoing issue of faculty governance at Howard University that. Oh wow, are you saying that? Cancel. Let me double check. Did the email, and I'm just seeing something that might have, did the email requesting an interview not go out? Oh yeah, it did. Okay, I was about to say that would explain why I didn't hear back, but no, it did. So we'll see. But anyway, first of all, thanks everybody for coming through. No, this will be part 2 of my quote unquote series review of the trials of Winnie Mandela series that you can only see on Africa Netflix. So you either have to VPN your way or find some alternative for the time being to see it. And this is I did an initial response to the first 2 episodes that I saw a couple of days ago, and today I'm going to finish talking about the remaining episodes that I've now seen. And I've even heard from a couple of people. I mean, this has been a very interesting, again, why one of the ancillary benefits of doing a YouTube show is when people are moved to reach out with some more information or their thoughts, some positive contribution to the discussion. And there's been a couple. And then there's also an overlap with the series that I did not realize with me and my show. So I'm going to leave that out there for a few minutes. I'm going to act a little bit like Dr. Winkler did, Dr. Daw did last night on his stream, fraudulent scholars, and I'm gonna leave that little teaser out there. There's a fascinating overlap. uh, I don't know about Get Out, but I've been finding out apparently about Keegan Michael Key and his spouse. What are we booing? Oh, did they ever? Now I won't go so far as, for some reason I don't want to use the word lie. I will say overemphasize. There's an overemphasis of this that I'm going to come back to in a few minutes. That I think is a bit diabolical, but yeah, a little bit of a cliffhanger. I'm gonna leave that there for a minute. There's a fascinating overlap between me and my show and this series. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, gonna go back and watch the video on the first 2 episodes. Okay, right on. Feel free. Yes, and come on back later. That's fine. Thank you very much. But before I get to that, I do want to. There is something. So I did just get this email. I admit I'm not thrilled with the AI art problem. Is in addition to all the other problems of AI is a problem, and I know folks without resources or access to artists, or without, certainly I'm realized, there's limitations to my artistic talent. It's tempting to go get on an AI platform and say, make up a nice little something for me. And but I'm more and more philosophically opposed to its use. But that said, in this email that came out from William Damani Keene regarding what's going on at Howard University, and again, I'm counting this as part of my ongoing Not a Different World HBCU series that folks can check at the link tree, and I mixwhatilike.org will take you to my link tree, and then you can avail yourself of the project if you would like to participate. If you have been a student, faculty member, staff, admin at an HBCU, this is for you. It's a short, well, depending on you, you could be long. Some have chosen to make some long responses. You can offer up short or long responses to seven short questions, and support the project, participate in the project. But so as Keene writes, Black voter suppression by Louisiana, Texas, and Tennessee legislatures and Howard University's board. How did the flagship historically Black university land on a list alongside regressive legislatures? In the American South. How did that happen? Well, it's only a 4-minute read. Actually, the Howard board led the way well before the horrific April 2026 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court that was just made, stripping away voting rights. In 2021, the Howard University board, in violation of its own bylaws, eradicated the voting rights of more than 115,000 alumni, students, and faculty for affiliate members of the Howard University Board of Trustees with zero consultation. When SCOTUS falsely claimed that racial disparities in elections no longer existed, it greenlit Southern state legislatures to dismantle predominantly Black voting districts. Lawmakers moved instantly, even canceling active elections in Louisiana and perhaps Alabama, while claiming race had nothing to do with their gerrymandering. Ironically and regrettably, The Howard Board also canceled ongoing elections prior to the vote to abolish the positions for alumni, faculty, and student trustees, and cited clearly pretextual reasons for its anti-democratic decision. So again, this is why I keep coming back to this point about HBCUs not a different world. And Keene, in his own way, is making the point for me by saying that the people running the board of the board of trustees at Howard University, by running Howard, in other words, Keene is saying Howard is being run as is any other institution within this settler colonial capitalist white supremacist state. So the idea that is constantly promoted and often misunderstood, that HBCUs are some independent Black institution devoid of class, devoid of attachment to the state itself, and operating on some sort of progressive, dare I say, even revolutionary nationalist purpose, is all it's a complete fabrication. This is now the HU board. I'm sorry, King continues. That is how the HU board got on the list, while violating its own bylaws and later claiming in court filings that no one, not even the courts, can hold them accountable. Both the duplicity of the court and the pretext of the legislatures are reminiscent of the announcement by the then HU trustee board chairman. He gave disingenuous rationales for the board's unwise decision that abolished nearly 100 years of alumni involvement in the selection of alumni trustees. It also negated the involvement of students and faculty born of student struggle in the seating of trustees, first established in 1970, more than 50 years before. A complete betrayal of shared governance. And this is something that we feel throughout the academic world, certainly at HBCUs, but broadly more throughout the academic environment. There's a real problem where there's supposed to be theoretically this faculty involved shared governance, and increasingly, despite tenure, rank, seniority, it's all being stripped away. The Howard Board acted in violation of its own bylaws with zero input from alumni, students, or faculty, and in total disregard for the spirit of shared governance, the gold standard in higher education. Alarmed by this overreach and acting independently, multiple groups of alumni, including former student trustees, former student body presidents, and other former student leaders, challenged the board but received only perfunctory responses. The one group, self-styled concerned stakeholders, was granted a Zoom call, which board members steadfastly refused to answer a single question and strictly enforced a hard stop at 60 minutes. Requests by the group to the board for related documents went unmet. This style of stonewalling reminds one of the Black and other citizens and elected officials in a noble but fruitless protest at the Tennessee Capitol. There, white legislators laughed behind their hands as they voted to cut pieces of the Memphis district so that Black votes would be diluted into 3 predominantly white areas. Similarly, more than 2,500 Howard alumni signed a petition opposing the board's decision. Protesting students included the issue in their demands. A new and independent alumni group, HAU, Howard Alumni United, was formed, a collective of Howard alumni, faculty, parents, and students. The capstone group objected, and a demonstration, Howard Unity Day, was held at the flagpole on campus. The voter suppression methods in Tennessee, Louisiana, et al., and by Howard Board are different, but the goals are the same. Eliminate the impact of Black votes and consolidate absolute unchecked power. The fight back, David versus Goliath in court. When citizens and elected officials in Nashville faced stubborn political intransigence, they turned to the courts. Left with no alternative, Howard alumni did precisely the same thing. In December 2021, 10 loyal and dedicated alumni representing 4 decades of Howard graduates filed a lawsuit to restore the alumni voice. I am one of the 10 plaintiffs whose yearbook photos are shown below. Lead plaintiff attorney Timothy Jenkins is shown at the top left. 2 of us are former members of Howard's Board of Trustees. For 4.5 years, the board's high-priced international K Street law firm has delayed, obfuscated, and exponentially outspent the plaintiffs. Despite these stalling tactics, the lawsuit filed by attorney Donald M. Temple now has a critical scheduling conference and possible hearing. The plaintiff's motion for partial summary judgment in D.C. Superior Court this Friday, May 15th, subject to court postponement. If you would like to support any of these efforts, you can see the Cash App, PayPal addresses here on the screen. I believe this is Keen here, if I'm not mistaken. But and I will make all of this information available in the show description as well. I did want to let's see. Uh, one of these I looked at and wanted to. No, it's not that one. I'm going to, let's see. Where is the, I can't find the one of these links um is this the story? Anyway, I'll make the link available because there's some background to this that is provided in this email that that I can't now, for some reason I can't find the one that I did. Oh no, this is it here, the related medium story. I'm sorry, everybody. My apologies. Um, so let me remove and share. This will also get put in the show description. In fact, I'm going to clip this and post this separately. I just didn't want to just do a whole separate thing in advance of today's show. But a call to restore shared governance at Howard from April of 2026. Why would loyal alumni choose to sue the university they love? Howard University was chartered by Congress in 1867 as a national charitable trust, not as a private corporation governed by an insulated elite. Eventually, its bylaws deliberately established shared governance, including mandatory representation of alumni, faculty, and students on the board of trustees as a core constitutional principle, not a courtesy. Thus, for nearly a century, in the spirit of truth and service, the system of shared governance with affiliate trustees has been embedded in Howard's governing bylaws and traditions. It was designed to facilitate accountability and avoid the insularity that often comes with purely self-selected governing bodies. Instead, exactly 100 years later, voting input by alumni, students, and faculty for affiliate trustees was abolished. Between 2020 and 2021, that democratic structure was dismantled without lawful authority. This is Donald Temple, who will be in court tomorrow in DC Superior Court. And again, they have information if folks want to learn more or offer up some support. As they say, our lawsuit is not about personality or politics. It's about whether Howard University will continue to be governed by its own constitutional instruments or by administrative fiat. Howard was founded and built to teach democracy to a nation that denied it to Black people. So, you know, with all due respect to their effort, I mean, I can't agree with this claim. That's not why Howard was founded. And it was none of these HBCUs were founded to teach democracy to a nation that denied it to Black people. They were all founded to create a form of Black people that would work within and support well as so-called citizens what is claimed to be a form of democracy in this nation. And I think that misunderstanding is still at play. So I'm not suggesting that Keene or anyone else here is wrong for doing this. For struggling. I don't think we should give up sites of struggle. I just think that fundamental understanding of the history, I think, is problematic. So, and then April Silver, I noted, is one of the people involved, of course, interviewed here a number of times in the past. So I'm going to continue to follow that, and I'll put the stuff in the show description, particularly of the clip that goes up with about this later. And but again, these are not different worlds. That's the point, unfortunately. And these HBCUs are often run as Black versions of all the other institutions. And General Howard is often given a more friendly and liberal reading. I'm not an expert on his history, but he is often considered to have been a Union general in favor of abolition. So, but he was, again, to at least part of the point there, he was not black and he was not a black revolutionary. So, and Howard is not designed to produce black revolutionaries. And again, that William Corson book is we should revisit it. This is why he went and worked there in the 60s and 70s, so he could assess the potential for Howard to become a threat. Yeah, Lee, I agree. They have to be truthful about the role HBCUs play, except for Morris Brown, the Morris Brown of ear doctor fame. So, okay, so that was it. Again, I've reached out to Keen and maybe I'll reach out to April and some others and see if they want to talk any more about this. But and I'll keep us all posted. Okay, so let's get to this. Let me see. Let me just make sure I'm not. Yeah, I can save that. I'll come back to that. Okay, everybody. And Leah, by the way, it was great seeing you the other night at the Crushing Wheelchairs event. Thank you very much for coming and supporting that. Oh, wait. Tomorrow could work. I need to double check my physical. Okay. No worries. Thanks, and let me know. So we may have an interview tomorrow with William Keene, Damani, that is Keene. Yeah, so stay tuned. Right on time. All right, let's get into this because I went back and watched episodes 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So a number of things to talk about in this Winnie, the trials of Winnie Mandela. And my summary note here at the top says that this series, somewhat similar to what I said initially, the series wants us to mostly be okay with today and to not address ourselves to the today as was done by radicals of the past. The series wants us to be mostly okay with today and to not address ourselves to today's reality as was done by radicals of the past. And I think that is ultimately the goal. So it's a very well done, well produced series. Technically, it looks good, sounds good. There's a lot of stock footage and they did a lot of research. There is value to be mined from the series, but as is the case with most of these products, if you're not going into it with a certain perspective or level of competency with the histories or the politics, it will you'll watch the series and you think, wow, okay, Winnie was an important and complicated person. I don't think I agree with everything she did. I certainly don't agree with the radicalism she represents, but I've learned some things and I appreciate her. And, but as one of the pundits says, at a point to which I will return repeatedly today, there is a return to normalcy in South African politics. In the post-apartheid era, there's a quote, return to normalcy. And that's what we're supposed to accept, that what we have today is normal and the best we could hope for. So all of that inequality that I talked about in the first part, all of that 4% of the land owned by Black South Africans in South Africa, 4%. don't worry about that, because it's unfortunate perhaps, but this is the best we could ever expect, and we definitely don't want to address that. If you feel it is a concern, we definitely don't want you to address that concern as Winnie would have or her comrades would have. We don't want that. That's inappropriate. So that's why I was saying before that these series, they're not really about, like, this isn't really about South Africa, and it's not really about Winnie Mandela. It's really about telling Africans broadly, and then whoever else sees this broadly, this is normalcy, and this is okay. And whatever issues still exist can be addressed by, at most, liberal, progressive politics, at most. And really not even that is necessary. In fact, this is what I was going to skip, but Walimu Wandia sent this to me, and I think it's unfortunately relevant to the point I'm making here. Andrew Kibade, executive director of Chedda app, says financial struggles stem from poor early money management education, urging parents to teach children financial skills and shift focus from consumption to building financial intelligence through practical learning. So calling Dr. Brown and the financial literacists have, this is their approach to pan-Africanism, to teach financial literacy and have financial literacy promoted as a mechanism to the normalcy of today. And it's not we don't need radical politics. We don't need socialism. We don't need nationalism. We don't need a United States of Africa under scientific socialism. We don't need any of those things. We just need to teach our children early on. And he says the reason most people struggle financially is because they're not given the right experience or the right observation, or they are not surrounded with understanding how money works. That's the reason why people are poor. Not colonialism or neo-colonialism, et cetera, and so forth. And then, as I pointed out in this Twitter exchange, first of all, I don't like the pan-Africanism in the name Chedda app, which I read as an anti-pan-African approach to African American vernacular English. But worse is, I'll just show you here. The purpose of the app is to give your child the financial mindset you wish you had growing up. So you download the app, and then phase one, programming phase, the foundation years, the subconscious mind absorbs everything. So you're teaching kids through games how to save, earn, and choose. Then there's the critical window, where at age 7, their subconscious mind controls 95% of their subconscious still controls 95% of their mind. So we got to get in there and construct their cognitive infrastructure, as Jen Easterly has said. And then you learn how to, about creating cash flow assets and investments and measuring outcomes. From age 3 to 17, Chedda app helps you raise future cash flowing asset generators, wealth creators, and humanitarian responsibility stewards, not just good spenders. So again, it's back to this whole thing. Those who consume are bad, even though you drive the economy and produce wealth that is expropriated to the people who own the economy. Okay. So that's what I think ultimately this product is meant to support, that kind of worldview. So in episode 3, we get introduced to the artist who will create the mural that I used in the first thumbnail that is used on the cover of the Netflix special. So, and again, I don't mean this to be disrespectful to artists, especially since they can do things that I appreciate that I cannot do. But I did note that the artist becomes the narrator for episode 3, not, again, a radical political actor. And then I said, wow, that was slick, because the immediate person they follow up with is Dr. Fosa, who was an MK commander, who is thrown in intermittently in almost a way to throw off people like me. And this is why, again, I'm proud of the Vernon philosophy. I'm increasingly proud of what I think we should appreciate from Chidimaka, the 3-step propaganda model that that we discussed yesterday. That's why I'm grateful for Samantha Youssef and Mtume Gant and Renee Johnston and our broader crew of critical thinkers, and of course those in the Undefeated chat. Because if you're not paying attention, or if you're just sitting back, if you're not on alert, it will be like, oh, they included MK. That's the response to Jared's initial critique. But it's limited, not so it'll say Dr. Fosa, MK commander, and he'll say something relatively positive about Winnie, but it's almost exclusive to something about her character, not about the politics, not about the struggle or the purpose of the armed struggle, or the goals, or why, or what kind of South Africa they were fighting for. That's not really his purpose. And it does make me suspicious that he's there, because it's understood we can't appear to have done a good job on Winnie and exclude all of her actual comrades. But they're not there to offer us the leading, guiding narrative about her. So as I noted, right after that, we get so much in episode 3, so much time is spent on Winnie versus other Black people in South Africa, and very little explaining the context that is pitting her against class enemies, other ethnic groups, or whatever. It's always some intra-Black conflict that seemed to be getting a lot of the focus, in part. They don't say it this way, but in part because Winnie represented what still is a problem for movements today. A radical reminder that the liberalism leading many of these efforts today is insufficient. And then we immediately get introduced to the white Methodist preacher who knew the child Stompy, and who was claiming to be working in service of protecting children from harassment and violence of people like Winnie. So that's why. So it's like this. So you get the episode 3. We're introduced to the artist as narrator. A quick contribution from Winnie's comrades, and then it's right back to her conflicts. Not with the state, not with apartheid, not with white settlers, but with other Black Africans. So much focus on her claimed violence as opposed to that of the state was my next note. So we get so much of, what was she, how was she manipulating these young boys on the Mandela football club? What was the purpose of the football club? Was it a real football club? Was it a mask for thuggery? Was Winnie in control? Was she not in control? Did she have the boy killed? Was he killed by the football club? Who did it? That's just so much of the conversation. And then it's raised and again, making room for the potential remnants of my own uncorrected patriarchy. It bothered me to see that one of the pundits, who I'm going to play a clip from in a little bit, comes back to say that Winnie was singled out for her womanhood. So it's like, and again, it creates, I think, a very sophisticated and nuanced and well-produced sleight of hand that allows us to get a peek at her radical politics, allows us to hear from her. And I'm going to play a couple, at least, a couple clips from her so you can hear, where you hear her and you could see why she wanted to have this be made, why Winnie would have supported this. Because I kept struggling. Why is Winnie supporting this approach with this set of filmmakers, as I talked about in part one, with this? And so, but it's very well done. So you get, just when you're thinking, man, they've abandoned Winnie, you get a Winnie. Just when you think they've abandoned her radical politics, you get a reference to her MK, Dr. Folsa, the MK commander that pops up intermittently. But then so much of the focus is back on what was wrong with her. What were her shortcomings in struggle? And then brought back to say, but she's singled out because she's a woman. And I'm saying, and they raise an interesting point, because they do say, as I mentioned in the last, Chris Hani was accused of violence. Nelson was accused of terrorist violence in advance of his incarceration. But only Winnie and the violence associated with her is targeted. And I think there's something more than it just being about her being a woman. And I'm sure that does play a part of it. But I think it's because Nelson was rehabilitated in his image at the end of his life, away from the so-called terrorist. Chris Hani was rehabilitated by being assassinated in his driveway in 1993, right? So in other words, and they're not neither are the focus of this series. Winnie is singled out for what her alleged violence was, I think, not as much because she's a woman, but again, because she was, again, at that time, a long, still living, consistent political thorn. Beyond her being a woman, it was her constant political stances and her reminders that the ANC, even under her former husband, was a betrayal of the struggle. So to bring it back to and that, again, not with a sustained focus, to bring it back just to her womanhood, I thought was unfair. Because one, you don't really explore that point. And then two, you ignore it. The point I'm making is not raised. So my last note on episode 3 was, per her critics, should these allegations be more important than the work we know she did, or the struggle we know she represented? In other words, should the allegations that are just allegations, that are not substantiated, and that we later learn in the series are almost decidedly proven to be, that is the killing of Stompy, to have occurred without Winnie's involvement at all? But again, per her critics, should those allegations that we don't know what she did, we don't know for sure what she did or didn't do, why do they get so much attention over what we do know that she did in terms of her positive contributions to the free liberation struggle? And this is a clear imbalance to me in the series. So, all right. Moving into episode 4. Let me see. Let me see if I want to. In fact, I'm going to play. Let me play one of the clips that I pulled out. So you get moments like that, which is again why I think Winnie would have signed on and supported this. What I'm not clear on is, again, if she saw the final product, if she would have agreed with the final product, and yeah. Now, someone sent me, if I can, I should have had this. Someone sent me what they thought might have been a reason for no, that's not it. A reason for why Winnie would have ooh, signed off on this. And they suggested a couple books that I might be interested in reading, specifically 491 Days, Prisoner 1323, which was about Winnie's incarceration. Where did this person say they had a let's see, remember South Africa, so I think maybe I'm just not. I'll have to come back to that. But somewhere in this struggle over South Africa, the travel, read the books, but the mother Winnie in South Africa that rejected her. But the mother Winnie in the South Africa that rejected her with Tutu there trying to shame her as he never would have done to Hani and didn't do to others. Yes, were involved in it's not somewhere in this email is the thing I'm looking for. Okay, right. Oh, right. This person suggests here's my 2 cents on why Winnie did that. That is, so they wrote. I think. All right, you should read this book. When she was in prison, her children were one of her main concerns, as they were for most of the mothers incarcerated. You know, I think that even without knowing more, you're most likely right. Her daughters are not really the ones to have been involved as they were in this film. That is her granddaughters specifically. Here are my 2 cents on why Winnie did that to give them something for standing and economically. I could see that. I think that's a good point and one I wouldn't have considered that maybe Winnie did this in part at least to give her grandchildren some sort of standing and something that they could build, you know, make a little bit of money off of. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that that makes sense as I try to, you know, struggle with figuring out why she would but also because you get those you get a few moments like the one I just showed you where she gets to make her point directly, clearly, and she raises that valuable point, you know, almost to her critics and anyone really, but to say the very people who were supposed to be looking out for me while my husband's locked up and I'm raising these kids by myself now, and I'm also maintaining my appropriate standing as a comrade. They didn't they weren't there. They weren't there. And now at the end, having benefited from what I did, they want to come back and be critical of me. Nah, bro. Uh, there's mention in episode 4 about the fear of rebellion at the release of Nelson Mandela, which is why I think, again, whatever people want to talk about Afro-pessimism, Frank Wilderson's Incognito book and what it recounts in terms of the end of apartheid, Mandela's release, et cetera, I think is incredibly valuable to explaining this point here and why MK were told to put their weapons down, why Nelson agreed to that, and so on and so on and so on. Then they make this big thing talking about the release of Nelson in episode 4 and how Winnie Mandela, they claim to get her hair done and get dressed appropriately, made the release delay a few hours so that she could be there to walk out with him. And they kind of leave it to make it like that she did this unfairly or unjustly. And I'm thinking, I don't know the details of what was going on to get herself together, but I think it's perfectly appropriate that she be there to symbolically walk hand in hand with Nelson as they did and put the fists up in those famous moments. Yeah. And then she is clipped in pointing out in episode 4 that poverty is more pronounced now in South Africa than it was then. And then you get what I think are some important parts of this series. You get reference to the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, CODESA. And they don't explain it very much, but you get Winnie talking about, in a very powerful moment, talking to her grandchildren, where she says about Madiba, about Nelson, she says, quote, you are postponing the revolution with your deliberations. It will be a dummy freedom we are giving our people, end quote. This is again what Frank was talking about in Incognito. The concessions made to the white settlers, with the promises of, not taking land from whites and not being violent and all of it, all of that. Winnie's on tape. She says right there on you are postponing, she said to her husband, to Nelson, you are postponing the revolution with your deliberations. It will be a dummy freedom we are giving people. Then you see her saying, you see Winnie with Chris Hani, pictured with Chris Hani, and saying that if the talks failed, we will, at the time, she's saying, if the talks fail, we will go back to the forest and shoot our way to freedom, end quote. And then she said the same thing on Phil Donahue's show. And then what do they say right after that? They bring a talking head political scientist who's if I was really going to be serious about, like, if any of us are going to be more serious in terms of a review of what this series really did, I would go and read her work, and I'm sure it would reveal what was displayed in this series. But you get a political science professor who comes in to criticize, quote, the fantasy of cleansing violence. And this is why I'm saying, without a certain political education or a sophisticated viewing, too many people this will just wash over, and people will be, yeah, Winnie was kind of cool, and yeah, but she was misguided, just like anybody who talks about armed struggle and this, that, and the third, they're all misguided and immature. And so there has to be some sort of discussion about the fantasy of cleansing violence. And again, I'm putting this together given the various clips we see from Winnie and others, but the point would be, and I think a better way to have done that would have been to have Winnie respond to that, if you're going to include it at all, or to have the professor I mentioned earlier, who Dr. Fosa, who is an MK, listed as an MK commander, why aren't they interviewed about their thoughts on that? Why wasn't Winnie asked? So in 1992, Winnie, you said, if the talks break down, it's back to the forest. This political scientist, scholar of your life, says you're fantasizing about the cleansing of violence. What were your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about that? What was or is the MK worldview on violence and political violence and revolutionary violence? They could have found the Communist Party folks or students of that history, and to say, what was the Communist Party's views on revolutionary violence, and had a discussion of it. But no. We just get the standard, what for people like me might be moved by, but the standard viewer is going to recoil away from, pun intended. When you see Winnie stand up and say, if the talks break down, we're going back to the forest, and standing there next to Chris Hani, who, if you don't know that's Chris Hani or who Chris Hani is, the series isn't going to tell you. You just see this dude standing next to Winnie in some fatigues. Now, we heard earlier in episode 3 how, and 2 and earlier in the series, how Chris Hani's name comes up as someone who was given a pass for his violence, but no discussion of his assassination or who he really was, and no discussion of his relationship with Winnie, which would have been fascinating. You see them standing next to each other. She's in fatigues. I'm going to the hills. She says it again on Donahue. But there's no discussion of what that means, or why they would have reached that conclusion, or what they thought would have been. And then it goes almost immediately back into, well, actually, in episode 4, that's where we get this reveal that I'm holding off on in terms of the overlap between me and this series. I'm going to hold off on that, but it's in episode 4 where that's revealed. I'm going to come back to that. So, in fact, like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, invite others to join you, support the Patreon if you can, QR code up here, or the link in the show description. Sign up even just for free. Make sure you've hit the like button as well. And stick around, because before we leave, I will reveal this overlap between me and this series. Then we get some interesting little bits of commentary. There's an interesting moment where Winnie is talking about how her mother didn't want her to marry Nelson, not only the age difference, but Nelson was known as a ladies' man. And then she has a little joke about him, when they first, were getting together before he got locked up. And she's, she has a line in there where she says, "Oh, you think you're a man now because you're running around with MK?" And because, again, he was involved with that, And then at the end of episode 4, she says that he was that he did betray her big time. She says, politically, he betrayed me big time. And I think that's important. Now, I would have but again, it's the effect of the way it's delivered in this series. To the politically uninitiated, which is going to be the bulk of the viewers, they're just going to see this as, that's because we're being introduced to this character of Winnie Mandela as this, firebrand, this recalcitrant, unapologetic radical. So of course she's gonna feel betrayed by Madiba. Not encouraging that a viewer thinks she might be right, or that today's South Africa, instead of being a quote return to normalcy, is what she predicted would be the problem of an incomplete revolution that her husband betrayed. And instead of inviting us to investigate or allowing us entrance into that should have been like that's the beginning of a discussion, not the end of an episode. That's the beginning of something that should have been a sustained conversation. What do you mean Nelson Mandela betrayed you? What did he do versus what you thought he should have done? What is it that you wanted to be done? What was the impact on the country based on his decisions? What were the debates? Who was saying what? But we don't get any of that. We just get that it's more or less vague. He betrayed because I'm a real revolutionary. He wasn't. And it's almost reduced to, I just don't want to apologize for anything I'm accused of, even though I didn't do it. Instead of, he betrayed a revolution because we didn't get the land. We didn't get a redistribution of wealth. We didn't get a removal of settlers. We didn't get a punishment for past crimes of the settlers. We didn't get, we didn't win, as Desmond Tutu writes in his own autobiography, when he says, importantly, confessionally, people wanted the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to have the spirit of the Nuremberg trials after World War II, but the difference is we did not win. We did not defeat apartheid in the way the Nazis were defeated. So we couldn't put anyone on trial. We had to do a TRC. And that's what Winnie was saying. We wanted to win, though. What about that win, though? When does that get put back on the table? All right, episode 5. My first note here, once admitted previously on tape of the expressed state institutional organized campaign against Winnie Mandela, everything else has to be taken in that context and that of settler colonialism and white rule. That this was just passed over and not properly explored undermines claims of objectivity or balance. So that's how my note about starting with episode 5, that we've already seen, as I mentioned earlier, and there's a twist to that I'm going to come to. In part 1, I mentioned how we hear from Paul Erasmus, who was the head of the Stratcom, strategic communication group, who was tasked with permanent surveillance of Winnie Mandela, propaganda against Winnie Mandela, and discrediting and neutralizing her without assassinating her and creating a martyr. So we've already seen them acknowledge that that was the plan. And yet, in episodes 3 and 4 and now into 5, that just sort of fades into the background, and we get all the sustained focus on what did Winnie do wrong? How did Winnie behave? Did Winnie cheat on Nelson? Did Winnie get violent? Did Winnie, scream at somebody? Was Winnie rude to somebody? Was Winnie friendly with somebody? Did Winnie sleep with somebody? And it's like, wait a minute. You already admitted that the state had a whole wing of agents just to destroy this woman, and then we're just leaving that alone, and everything else is taken as legit. All right, then my next note was more has to be done on the scholarship of the talking heads in this, and that's what I was saying a minute ago. I definitely want to read Dr. Fosa's work, The MK Commander, because he was there offering friendly, supportive commentary on Winnie. Mostly depoliticized, though. And then we get these others, one of whom I'm going to show you in a little bit, who are either opposed to Winnie or kind of like, well, she's not horrible, but she's not great, and we've returned to normalcy. That phrase is just ringing in my head. reflective of the clip I played already of Winnie's abandonment. It's acknowledged in episode 5 that she had no real friends due to fear of her politics, and that led her to a quote grinding aloneness. And I thought this was pretty sad. That either through an inability to trust people or largely because of a fear of her continuing her radical politics, she felt a grinding aloneness at the end of her life, and that she was largely alone in the house that was built for her initially for her late husband. And I found that to be terribly sad, especially because of the reference to it being about her politics. The idea that you would abandon someone like her and reject friendship just because she reminded you of your own selling out is just terrible. And then I made a note that maybe this is another reason for her accepting this form of a series, that she had no real friends. So when you see people, I admit surprised at how many of the talking heads popped up friendly or as listed as a friend or business partner or something, that were white. I was surprised by the amount. But I think that has a lot to do with somewhat of what they showed us in this series, that so much of the focus being on her problems with other, compradors of apartheid in the Black community, led to this. But it's in episode 5 that we get a sustained focus on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the 3-year process that it was, and where I think most of the politics of the series are exposed. So you get whites. I thought it was interesting that they quote, they clip a white person saying during the TRC, "I'm not apologizing for what I did to these Black people, because war is war." And I don't know if this was done to quietly put something in that sides with Winnie, or if this was done in a more sophisticated, nuanced way to undermine Winnie's powerful commentary that is left in the film, where she's the one also saying, "I'm not apologizing for nothing." And in fact, my new favorite quote is, she says, "I'm a product of my people and my enemies." That is my new favorite.
Now listen, that's cool.
And I'm suspicious. So, having seen the series, I'm perfectly convinced that the filmmakers are intelligent enough, capable enough, and sophisticated enough to do what I'm suggesting may have been done here. That is, including this Afrikaner saying, "I don't apologize for what I did because war is war," to undermine when we hear Winnie saying it in a very powerful way, to make the point that that's what all the wrong people on both sides would say. To create the false equivalence between the colonizer and the colonized. To suggest that if the colonizer engages in violence against the colonized as part of the colonial imposition of themselves, that the colonized response, if violent, is just as bad. And of course, I reject that entirely. So I don't know if that was what was done, but I thought to note. She then says, Winnie does, that she was betrayed by Desmond Tutu and was the only one forced to what was called a retrial. So I did not know this until I watched this series. So in this way, I do find the series to produce some value. But you know what? I'm going to have to take a very quick break before I come back and explain what that value is. So let me, I'm gonna have to take a very quick break, and I will come back and pick up where I left off. And in the interim, I will leave you with go anywhere.
Let's go, Sam. It's party time. Let's go. Happy birthday to my man OG tonight. It's Virgo season, y'all. We gonna start this thing off right tonight. It's Virgo season. They the reason for breathing. One time for my loudmouth crew here tonight. Talking about Miss Shamika, Miss Ebony, Tasha back there in the cut shop. Warm it up for the Meadows tonight. The whole damn Meadows this evening. Ken Lanzo, yes Lord, Ken Lanzo came through. Oh, so yeah. One time for my 4th and 7th stars, y'all. One time for my main man Howie. Get on that ass, honeys. Oh, here we go. Hey, Trigger Tone. Let's go to work, man. Now here we go. Hey, Trigger Tone.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
One time for my sister in the house tonight. One time for Miss Keisha.
I almost don't want to stop
Play
it.
that song. Play that song. Let's get it on, y'all. Wait a minute. Break time.
All right. Oh, the numbers are dropping. People are leaving the stream. Oh my goodness, crazy. All right. That is, it's hot, right? Stop, stop playing with me. That's the What Band, by the way. The What Band. I think that's the What Band. Okay. I know. There's the Baltimore thing is I hear you. No disrespect. We all have our biases, and thank you, Leah. Thank you very much. Okay, so all right, so the series does I think it does an important, outside of the context of this particular series, this episode on the TRC, that is episode 5, that is almost entirely on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, is, I think, of importance, especially in the hands of people with a certain frame. So it's important that I think we see. But now that I'm thinking about it again, it kind of makes the same point I was just making. So it's important that we see Winnie Mandela say, Desmond Tutu sold me out, betrayed me. What's not made clear, though, is exactly what she means by that. What was the betrayal? In the series, the betrayal is limited to a justifiable complaint that Winnie is saying, Tutu, made it so that I'm the only one in this entire Truth and Reconciliation Commission covering the entire history of apartheid. Winnie is saying, I'm the only one forced to come back in here for what she said was a retrial. She was saying, and you see her in the clip saying during the commission to Tutu, first of all, I thought I was supposed to come here like everybody else and just say, whatever it is that I did, this, that, and the third. I didn't know I was coming in here and I was supposed to bring details, and I didn't know I was on trial. And then there's a quick reference to and I had to write it down. I said, surrounded by spies or not. Because there's like, they throw in there that everybody in Winnie's football club, in that youth football club, in the Mandela football club, and everybody working around her. On the one hand, you have one white agent talking head, Paul Erasmus, saying all of them were spies. All of them were agents. All of them were plants. All of them were reporting to us. Winnie was completely surrounded by spies. Then you get another white agent talking head from another department saying all of that was nonsense, and Winnie used those claims to justify or deny what was being said about her. But it's not followed up. So we get one white guy saying they're all spies, one white guy saying none of them were spies, it's all overblown. We get Tutu saying, Winnie, you must. He says, I beg of you to take accountability. And Winnie's saying, I'm a product of my people and my enemies. But none of it is followed up properly. In a 7-part series, as well-funded as this is, they had all the ample opportunity to talk to all the people they would have needed to talk to, including Winnie herself, to say, lay out the case. Why were you and Tutu on opposite sides of this thing? They don't do that. So then my next note is, this is not a history of South Africa. Remember in part 1, the filmmaker said in one of the podcasts that I referenced, people around the world are going to be introduced to the history of South Africa through this series. But it's not a history of South Africa. It's more a history of Winnie Mandela's accusations. It's not even a history of her work or her life. So little of that is in there. The title of the series is true. It's another trial of Winnie Mandela. That when they call it the trials of Winnie Mandela, they mean to include this series. So she's singled out even when her comrade points out that it's still in the context of being all that is discussed. So, right. So when again, the question is raised about Winnie being singled out, and even when they refer to her, go back to Dr. Fosa, and you see an MK comrade offering a commentary, which looks like you're getting the view from one of Winnie's comrades, and you are, except you're only getting his views on the very narrow point that she's being singled out. Not the why, and not an exploration of that. It's just that. But then we do get what I think is the most powerful point, at least in this episode, about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and what I think it says everything about the Truth and Reconciliation and Commission, and should have been more of a focus of this series. But to their credit, this point is at least included. Professor Msimana, who we're going to hear from later, who is on this return to normalcy thing, does point out, and that's why I'm saying that I would have to really read her work to get clear on where she is politically, or how she does this. But it is included that she points out that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission spent 9 full days on Winnie and only 3 on everything related to media, the private sector, the corporations, the state itself. So as much as anything about this series, that is
message.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission that went on for 3 years, covering all of the crimes and all of the histories of the state and the apartheid in South Africa, spent 9 days on Winnie and 3 on everything related to media, the private sector, corporate mining structures, the state itself. That is that it's like, again, that should have been a headline, and that starts a multi-series investigation into the life and politics of Winnie Mandela. Like, that's a better way of doing it. If you wanted to stay focused on the politics and weren't trying to create a narrative about Winnie's important, but she's now gone, as are her politics. And what we have now is normalcy. 4% Black ownership of land in South Africa, normalcy. Rampant poverty and inequality throughout the country, normal. It's normalcy. That's normal. Claims to democracy, freedom, Black inclusion in governance and leadership, that's all that seems to matter. And then you do see Tutu begging her to take responsibility. And she says, look, she says something almost, she says, look, I'm not, I'm not apologizing. And then she says in the interview portion that she says of Tutu, he could go to hell, or that she told him off the record that he could, something like that. I don't think that was said on the commission record, but she did say in the thing that he could go to hell. And I'm telling you, when he showed up at our Africana Studies and Research Center that day under the invitation of the late, great Dr. James Turner, while he was at Cornell University to fundraise, and he came and gave that nice private talk to students and staff and faculty at the Africana Center, and it was brutal. He was there, championing the wonders of the post-apartheid era. And then when a brother from one of the townships stood up and in tears talked him down, saying it's worse for us today than it was under apartheid, he basically just said, he said, I've sung enough for my dinner. That was a direct quote. He said, I've done, I gave my talk to the university. I've talked to you all. I'm ready to eat. It was wild, man. It was wild. And had I seen or known this about the TRC then as a grad student, I would have absolutely raised a ruckus about that. But I was far too ignorant then, and arguably still today. So then into episode 6, and it starts with a reference to the assassination. I think it's of Samora Machel. And what I thought was a powerful moment of this series is you see Winnie at the time in 86, I think it was, break down. And I think it's interesting. I don't know what was selected from the available footage, but this is by far the most broken and emotional we see Winnie Mandela. In fact, it's the only time we see her shed a tear. It's the only time we see her in any kind of an emotional collapse. And as they say, it wasn't just the personal friendship with Michelle. It was the comrade. He was her comrade. And to me, it was reflective of that's what she wanted politically, not Nelson. Like, we don't see any of this emotion around Nelson at any point in the series. And then I noted, kind of like what Malcolm used to say, that for every person clipped in the street praising Winnie, we get at least one talking head or somebody they pull out who produced criticism of her. And then it gets interesting again in terms of the strategic communication piece, because as I wrote here, Stratcom has brought back as an unjustifiable excuse that created a paranoid space for Winnie, but without any evidence. So I thought I was like, wow, that's interesting. So as I noted in the previous episode, you already acknowledged this whole strategic communication thing was a real deal, and you put it in the background, and now you drag it back out in episode 6 to say that it wasn't really that much of a thing. That other white talking head to say it wasn't that much of a thing, and that Winnie ended up benefiting more from the strategic communication unit because she could blame them for everything that was said accurately about her that was, showing her to be doing something wrong, right? So it was wild. And then they bring back that Paul Erasmus dude that I showed you last time, which I thought was fascinating, and this was for me a plot twist because he's introduced initially as the security branch policeman and working with the strategic communications unit, but by the end of this episode, you realize that in the early 90s, I think it was, or the mid 90s, at some point, it would have been after 93, at some point, later in the 90s, maybe, he meets with Winnie in Kenya and they become friends. And then he and his son become friends with the family. And I'm wondering if that's why he's pictured here wearing an ankh. I thought that was like, why is he wearing an ankh around his neck? And maybe it's because he had some sort of, they describe this friendship that emerged between Winnie and him once they had a sit down in Kenya and could really lay out what was going on. He meets with Winnie and explains Stratcom and its sophistication. And then she says it's the sophistication of the Stratcom that scared her more than anything. And they're now friends with Winnie. And she was friends with, and they were friends with Winnie until she passed away. And they talk jokingly about how Erasmus, all of his colleagues have died. And she says, I'm glad. and that maybe he lived because he had a change of heart or something like that. I don't know. And then they're back to Stompy. And her alleged involvement in the killing of this 14-year-old boy. And it comes out that years later, there's more research done and they found the bodies. And that ultimately it leads to her exoneration for having any involvement, which I thought was interesting. Now they leave something out. They leave it so that they say that so her detractors would say that the reason she was exonerated is because even though they found the bodies and the remains and they could determine how people were killed and this, that, and and then they could prove where she was or wasn't and what she did or did, her detractors will say that there was just enough missing in the evidence that would lead to some inconclusiveness. But ultimately, she was exonerated, and then we get some good moments. We hear her say again that she regrets nothing. She would do it all over again. She apologizes for nothing. She talks about how when Nelson remarried the widow of Samora Machel, that she and Michelle's widow to the end of her life had a very good relationship, that this was not an issue. You see Nelson, Michelle's widow, and Winnie pictured together on a number of occasions. And then the question is raised. I wrote it down. But I don't have it in quotes, so I don't know exactly what was said. Or I don't remember exactly what was said, but it's raised at the end of episode 6. The contradiction, and I think Winnie's saying this, or something is said that led me to write this down, that Nelson could forgive his oppressors, but not Winnie. That to the end of his life, he never forgave her for what she was accused of doing, and I think it had everything to do with her political alignment. That from the time he was out of prison, and particularly after they divorced, when it became clear that he would not be able to have his post imprisonment life connected to the consistently radical politics of Winnie. And then he went on to again forgive the apartheid regime and South African settlers, but he could not forgive Winnie, and apparently they did not, have a too close a relationship at the end. Then episode 7, well, they actually, I started a note here. Dr. Msimana. Oh, this is okay. This is where I was telling myself. Okay, this is where I'm saying I should play the return to normalcy piece here.
Unhappy the land that has no heroes. No, unhappy the land that needs heroes. So, yeah, I mean, whether it's Winnie or Nelson, this idea that we need heroes at all for South.
And I'm sorry, I wrote it down incorrectly. Msimang. I'm sorry, not Msimana. My apologies. Msimang.
Africa, again, has been both our saving grace and our biggest downfall. At their best, what heroes do is that they inspire us, and they allow us to imagine what might be possible. And so there's something very beautiful and important about the heroes that we have had as South Africans, because this was a country that was so defined by this bleak, grim, dystopian reality. So we needed that at a particular moment. I think with the return of normalcy in our politics, the idea of heroes is deeply problematic, because it insists that we continue to need saving in ways that take agency away from us. And so in normal times, I think what you need are normal people who take actions and then who hold people to account.
So I didn't like that at all. As I played you in the other clip, Winnie was herself saying, I'm just a normal person who was abandoned by the people who should have been looking out for me when my husband was in jail and I'm raising my kids and I'm continuing with the struggle. She was saying, stop treating me like I'm something different. I'm just a normal person who wanted liberation and fought with my people for freedom. You all made me some sort of something else because of my husband and because of my politics and because of what the strategic communication group said was necessary to not create a martyr, but create a neutralized, empty symbol. And why in so-called times of normalcy would we not want to commemorate the heroes who brought this nominal normalcy to us? How did you get this state of normalcy if not for the heroic work of people like Winnie? So I was just like, I don't. And what does honoring Winnie Mandela have anything to do with the material conditions of Africans in South Africa? And what does honoring Winnie have to do with undermining the agency of people in a society? But it was, I just was really bothered by that return to normalcy piece. And this, and I wrote here, this is what I suspected about accepting today as normal times and in need of measured responses. And then I wrote no. And then for a lot of episode 7, we're back to the disappearance of the boys. Like, why is this the focus? Professor Murudu brings this back up in the series, and she says she went back to the TRC to address these icons. Why? Who? Evidence against Winnie is that the oh, right. And then this professor says, in a weird twist, they go back, despite in episode 6 them saying Winnie had been exonerated for the killings of the football club. In a weird moment, they have a Professor Marudu, I believe, saying that the evidence against Winnie. So remember, I told you they found the bodies. They were able to do autopsies to determine the methods used in killing the boys. And what they end up saying is that the methods used in killing the boys of the football club, because those kids were killed in ways that did not fit the pattern of state killings, that was suggested as evidence against Winnie. And I wrote, and yet, ... meaning that, and yet, ... this pattern of state killings is never brought in as context appropriately for what is happening in this series. The apartheid state, the history of settler colonialism, the maintenance, the application, the method of rule was not ever explained properly. And so the idea, and that's why we could end up with a TRC spending 9 days on Winnie and only 3 days on the state. And because so much of so much of the desire here is to say, let's focus on the fact that we can use this hundreds of years of patterns of killing Black people by the state against Winnie, because the people we're saying she killed were killed in using different methods. I was like, that's slick and bizarre. Slick and bizarre. They keep coming back to this, wanting Winnie to be accountable for Stompy's killing, but the ongoing unequal conditions that got mentioned in passing episodes ago get unaddressed. No one is to be accountable for that, because now we've returned to normalcy, where everyone has agency. We don't need heroes. We don't need reminders of a radical struggle. We don't need all of that. We do need Winnie and other radicals to be held accountable for what they did or what we are accusing them of having done. But we're not holding anyone accountable for the conditions that put all of this in motion in the first place. We do get a return of Dr. Fosa, her MK comrade, saying again that she was loving, caring, and always first to show up. But then we get that Professor Hassim, who was the political scientist who was opposed to Winnie. We get her coming back to say that Winnie is, quote, an empty signifier. But equally, young people want only to see the good embodiment of what is radical. She was a flesh and blood human being, end quote. And I'm saying, I don't agree to call her an empty signifier. And that the young people who want to see her as an embodiment of what is radical want that because the conditions they still suffer require radical responses. So instead of let's demonize Winnie and spend endless amounts of time on what we think she did wrong, with a few spatterings of supportive commentary here or there, let's leave it to be, we can pour into her anything we want. which of course is anybody. You could say the same thing about anybody, and then of course you could say the same thing is being done in opposition to radicalism, that this so-called empty signifier is being filled with reactionary claims of her violence and hostility and her abuses, as opposed to her heroism and the war she was forced to take up in the first place, struggling against colonialism. So as I said here, does Dr. Marudu or anyone else hold anyone else accountable for anything? Is anyone else accountable for anything? Or is it just Winnie? Is it only Winnie and the radicals that are to be held accountable? And then it ends with, I am the product of the masses of my country and my enemies. And that is, again, the bar. They do give her that bar. Let her, I'm going to pull up one more. I had one more clip to share, and then I could check the chat. So this is, I think this is in part to what this was, I should have played it earlier, what she was saying in response to the TRC commission.
Call my boy. You know nothing about that.
No, my bad. That was just a clip I had I played it at the right time to put a cap on this discussion, because that is bars. And so we do get little moments of that I again think are valuable and important, and maybe why she found it worthy of engaging the process like this in the first place. And again, I would hope that she would be pleased with the final product, although I don't know that she would if she even saw it. I'm not sure. But the point still remains. That's the energy that I appreciate, and that is constantly met with attempts to balance and undermine throughout the series, in my humble estimation. That vibe, because again, that could have been explored in terms of what is happening in contemporary South Africa. For instance, I think it would have been great to say, what are the differences in conditions as you see them today versus then? But I love that point. Don't ever tell me to forget or how I should remember how we fought them. And I got a problem with a negotiated settlement. It would have been better if we had won. And I think that's important. And again, it's the only thing I remember from reading that book, but that's why I think it's important that Tutu said it in his autobiography back in the day. We didn't win. And let's be at least clear and honest about that. We did not win. So when someone's talking about a return to normalcy, we have to understand it, and that's in the context of an absence of victory. The normalcy is a failed revolution and the continuity of settler colonialism. Now, if we found pockets where we benefit, and I get a tree-lined street house, and you get a tree-lined street house, and that one gets a tree-lined street house, and then the rest of them are still in the townships, in the hoods. That has to be understood in the context of a failed revolution, of an absence of victory. And it shouldn't be that I say we won enough because my life is okay. And as long as I don't look past the end of my street, I'm fine. That's not the point. That's not the point. And that's why I love that energy that she brought in there, that we got to see at least a little bit. We didn't win. And I don't like a negotiated settlement. I'm going to finish my little bit of tea and fruit, but I don't like it. I don't like it. So I don't know. Again, I'm glad I watched the series. I think for those of us who approach this with a certain politics, we can find value in the series, but we are going to take a global L overall. The net of this is going to be an L. because most people who will watch this are going to watch this and walk away thinking, at most, she's kind of an interesting woman. And if you're clicking close on that Netflix video and getting in, an air-conditioned vehicle and then riding off into the sunset, you can be like, this is, and if you are at the other end of the class spectrum, you're going to be at least encouraged to think that Winnie and them did everything that could be done, and now we're in a new state of normalcy. And if you're still poor, go get that Chedda app and teach your kids some financial literacy. That's what I think. That's ultimately what I think is the end result here. So I did leave this with a little bit of sadness and thinking that not only do we lose Winnie, we see her pass on and her funeral and all this at the end of the series. We obviously know she's not here anymore. And it does, I took it at least, and this may be saying more about me than anything else, I took it like this was meant to be like a closing, this closes the chapter of that generation's struggle. And we are now, let's put it away, forgive her, don't forgive her, whatever. But now we're in a new normal. We're definitely ignoring all of that radicalism because we didn't learn a damn thing about it in that 7 hours. Other than her saying we didn't win and I want like we don't hear from her or anyone else about what a victory should have looked like or would look like today, or what is wrong with today that would require us to consider this to be a loss. So it's yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's it. Right on time too. Are there any, let me see, were there if you have any questions, comments, queries, conundrums, please recycle them. Definitely like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, throw a comment in there if you got one, and make sure you are supporting all these other spaces. Like I said earlier, the thing that stuck to me is how she remained firm with the cause. She never stopped saying how the struggle was decolonial for land. Exactly right. And I think that's why they punished her with silence and aloneness. That part about her being, what was the phrase again? Oh man, but it was sad. What was the phrase again? No, I can't even find it. Grinding aloneness. How many of the so-called comrades that she had from the struggle are still around today? I don't know. There were at least a couple, because we saw Dr. Fosa, who was listed as an MK comrade in the early 80s. We saw another young man who was only on camera to drive around in his top-down Porsche and show us where there used to be a cache of MK weapons. Like, that's what I'm saying. So there are people who I would assume are still around, or maybe, or would, but they weren't asked to be on camera here. Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate that. And thank you for coming through. Oh, right. I almost forgot this. The connection to the show. I set it up as so much of a teaser, I forgot. Oh man, I'm terrible. I'm even bad at self-promotion. This is terrible. Yeah, let me get to that. So in episode 4, they're talking about the early 90s. Nelson comes out. There's this the way I'm describing it, at least, a kind of confusing, unclear, we're not sure which way the country's going to go, Are we really free? Is this nominal? What kind of freedom? You know, because at least for a minute, Hani is still there, Winnie is still there with the fists up and the fatigues. It's like, and they go into this thing and they're talking about the moment, and they make a reference. I wonder, could I no, I couldn't do it now because I should have, you know what, I should have clipped that, but they make that's my fault. Let me see here. They show them on camera. The group, and I reached out to let's see, let me get this pulled up here. Just to give you an example of what I'm talking about. They show a clip of prophets of the city, who are described here as Cape Town's hip-hop pioneers. In 1988, Shaheen Arifdeen and DJ Reddy D began experimenting on a small 8-track home studio in Cape Town. The result was Our World, widely regarded as South Africa's first hip-hop album. Tracks like Dollar Flat and the first Cape slang rap song alongside socially conscious anthems such as Stop the Violence and Roots immediately positioned Prophets of the City, or POC, as the voice of township youth navigating life under apartheid, sometimes also known as South Africa's Wu-Tang. Not quite Mama's Biscuits, but almost as good. Not, you know, nobody can be as good as Mama's Biscuits. But, and when I saw that, I said, oh, snap, that's my man. So because once upon a time, your boy came across Shaheen, the co-founder of Prophets of the City, at a conference, at a Words, Beats, and Life conference in Washington, D.C. in the mid-2000s. And we bonded at the conference because both of us were at a session and we ended up being similarly critical of the neoliberal approach to the discussion of hip hop and politics. So we started bonding, build, and learned, and then he eventually produced this. So I couldn't find the extended version of that, but he produced the intro that I would use on my radio show and at the Real News Network in 2015, where he produced the beat, the scratches there. He took my voice and cut it up and made that hook. And then from there, what I'm probably going to do is just post it separately, because then he and I and another colleague sat down and did an interview about South Africa, hip hop, the colored community. He's from the colored community, race and all of that in South Africa. Really good dude. And I reached out to him, so hopefully we can reconnect, and he'll be a guest here to talk about this series and many other things as well. So salute to Shaheen and Prophets of the City. And I said, so that was the teased overlap between me and this series. I said, goobly goop, there goes my man Shaheen. Papa's Unleavened Pancakes. When we reform the band, that's what we'll be. PUP. It's already got it's got its acronym already set up. Auntie's Omelets. That's crazy. That's crazy. Shame, shame. Mama's Flapjack. Shame. Yeah, so my Winnie Madikizela episode is going to sound like a love letter to her, and I'm fine with that. Netflix made liberal comprador propaganda of Mama Winnie by Boo. And yeah, that book 491 Days has been recommended to me. I think I've only, I don't think I've read much of that, if any of it. I think I've only read the My Heart Went With Him book, but now I don't remember. So again, I mean, this is a good point, a good question. You know, there is no discussion of Robert Sobukwe. There's only passing reference to Oliver Tambo. There's no, I mean, again, that's the point. When the filmmaker again says in his podcast that people are going to get a history of South Africa, they're not. They don't even do kind of the basic History Channel kind of thing, you know, where they start off with, you know, here's Winnie, but let's go back. And in 16, the Dutch showed up, and then in the 19th century, the Boer War. They don't go into all of that. They don't even do that. And then in 14, they officially instituted a part. You know, they don't. No. You don't get none of that. Steve Biko not mentioned at all. Chris Hani in passing, Tembo in passing. Samora Michelle only so we could see Winnie Mandela actually break down and cry. We don't hear any. What was his politics? What was he doing? Why was he her comrade? You're on your own. Have you explained Get Out was about Keegan? So I've just been seeing all this stuff about what is apparently. So did you all see the thing? So there's a Black woman comic who recently did a show where she talked about Locke and Banana. And she said, I was signed on to do a show with Locke. And then Locke's wife, then Banana's wife called me and said, and she said in the Black woman comic said, and I don't know, you know, I don't know them like that. I don't know Locke. I don't know Banana's wife like that. I'm supposed to do this thing with Locke. I'm signing a contract. We're going to do the thing, make some money, do a show, some shows, whatever. But Banana's wife calls me and says, watch out, because Locke's wife gives me oh my God, what's his name? She said his wife gives me the vibes of the wife that killed, what's his name? The SNL comic who was really funny. Phil Hartman. She gives me Phil Hartman's wife vibes. So the Black woman comic's like, whoa. Longer story short, apparently, and of course, Locke and Banana are Key and Peele, right? Locke and Key, Banana Peele, and Peele, Michael Key's wife. Both of them have white wives, which I think is all. Both of them are mixed. Both of them have white mothers, and both of them have white wives, which I think is fascinating. And then Key, I didn't know this either. Key was both born to an interracial couple, and then put up for adoption, and then adopted into an interracial couple's house. So he got double layered, mixed. But apparently his white wife is a monster in the business. Like, she's mean to everybody. Nobody likes her. She messes up all his relationships. He apparently is very friendly. Everybody likes him, but they're like, I can't mess with you. Your wife is a problem, bro. And that's why people have suspected that we've not seen Key in any of Jordan Peele's films. And then someone else somewhere in the stuff that I was watching made the point that I put in my little whatever there, that Get Out was really about Keegan Michael Key and what his wife had done to him. and why Jordan Peele was like, I can't work with you anymore. I'm moving off the TV show and making movies. I don't know. So I just thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. They never got out. They never got out. How come you avoided the lock and banana way? So listen, you know, okay, so this is actually, okay. One of the reasons I'm asking people to sign up at my Patreon, even just for free, is because since I've been doing this YouTube thing, because of the way because of the limited way I present myself, a number of people have found it of interest that I write a memoir. All right. I'm very resistant to the idea, but my man, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, has convinced me that the idea is valuable in the way that I think Toni Morrison convinced Angela Davis, which is you're not writing it about yourself. You're using the memoir to write about the people that you want to talk about and the movements and the ideas. So I was like, that's a compelling argument. So I was like, okay. But then I said to him, I would only want to do it if it was a memoir as told to Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, because I don't want to write. I don't like my writing. I don't like writing. I don't want to write. So what I said to him, but then I said, but he said, but I said, I would want to pay you. What would I have to raise to pay you so that you could do this correctly? Like you could actually sit down and do a good job and do it right. We came up with a ballpark figure. I have nowhere near that money. So what I thought I would do is do a teaser on Patreon and invite people to contribute. And if not through Patreon, but like some Kickstarter thing. So if it doesn't raise, nobody actually pays, or whatever those situations are, something like that. I'll work it out. The point being that we would have to crowdfund the payment to get, and then quietly off the record between me and 140 of you, you know, academia punishes people who try to work within it in ways we would want them to work within it. So Dr. Burrows does not have the protected career that the ivory tower scholars get. So he deserves the appropriate. And so to properly answer your question, all that to say, to properly answer your question, I would probably have to do it through a memoir. And if you all would sign up at Patreon and be available to at least hear the announcement, and then consider, once it's made, contributing, we could go from there. But the short answer for now would be that yes, I am a white mom biracial, and yes, my mother is a Jew. But I think it's best understood in an oversummary to say I was raised by a Jew, but not as a Jew. And so I think that's actually a good way of summarizing it. Raised by a Jew, but not as a Jew. So I was not raised in, like when I reference my grandmother, I don't have memories with her. Like wasn't raised in a Jewish community, in a Jewish family, doing Jewish things among Jews. Like that's not how and I was raised by a Jew who only ever married and had a child with a black radical man. So it's in there that whatever people think of me now, I can honestly say I am the logical conclusion of how I was raised. And even when my mother and I used to have arguments where she might have felt I went too far, I would say, but I am the logical conclusion of how you raised me. And it would be the argument winner almost every time, because she had to be like, all right, yeah. Maybe I would have wanted you to go this and that direction a little bit more, but all right, yeah. So, and then when I sat her and her sister down on my ship at age 18, when they came to visit me in the Navy, And I think this was the first time since. No, I'm wrong. That's not true. And I told them that I won't be dating white women. And like little faces were made. And I joked with them. I remember I joked with them. I said, you two didn't either. Like both. All of your men are black. Like, so don't make a face at me. Again, don't look crazy at me. What I'm saying, I'm not. So no, I could not have ever you know. And when we do the memoir, I will tell you that there was I did meet a person once upon a time in passing where that possibly could have been threatened, but I did make the conscious choice. It was like, that's not, I'm shutting it down before we even go anywhere. So yeah, that's it. Exactly. That's why this is my new favorite line. I am a product of my people and my enemies. Exactly, Yipper. This is why I know the hate from you is so authentic and delicious, because you know me. And one day Yipper and I are going to meet in person, and I'll be like, I knew we knew each other. Why, Yipper, the great reveal is that Yipper is like my dearest friend in real life. Is this a conversation you ever had with Glenn? I was late to hearing him down, but hear him note some of his story. Glenn was not mixed. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. Glenn was very fair skinned. I'm assuming you're talking about Glenn Ford, but Glenn was not mixed. And Glenn, so I wouldn't say we ever had a specific conversation. We sat down and say, let's talk about ourselves as you know, fair skinned Negroes or whatever. But over the years in talking, like little things would come up, and it was, you know, so Glenn was not mixed, and Glenn was raised ensconced in, I forgot exactly where in Georgia, wherever James Brown's Georgia radio station was put, Glenn, that's where Glenn was. But Glenn was ensconced in a black community and in black politics, black radio. He was early, even into rap radio. And as I said, he worked at James Brown's station in the early 70s. And he would tell the story of how he practiced his craft. So the way he would always go and find that, you know, stereotypically usually a black woman involved in some sort of community action who would be the spokesperson that he would then bring and put on the radio and and he talked about the conservative political nature of James Brown and all of that. But no, the only other time that I remember it coming up was that it was a joke that when Glenn was wanting to start Black Agenda TV, and he and I were the faces of it, we would joke. We would joke all the time, like, you know, that can't be, you know, we, you know, you and I can't be the faces of Black Agenda TV, right? You know, like we have to get some other people involved, right? It just doesn't hit right. So other than jokes like that, but no, Glenn, you know, and you know, all respect due to Glenn Ford. I had a black mother and a white absentee father, found my way to black liberation struggle through a white woman who gave me a copy of the autobiography of Steve Biko. Now that's interesting. A circuitous route. But again, as a black mother biracial, you are a step up from me. So congratulations. So your memoir will be the opposite of Obama and his white girlfriends. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My memoir would be more of a track record of failed attempts at pulling black women. Like, it's like, do you know honestly what I think is the most? This is now we're into silly time. I should probably end now. But the more common thing I think than anything has been. I'm actually kind of curious if I could somehow go back over my life to find everybody and ask them. But I feel like I've gotten more of the response from Black women saying something to the effect, "Why didn't you holler at me? Like, didn't you see all the signals?" Like, that seems to be what I get more than anything. like, like not overbearing aggressiveness or toxic masculinity or whatever. It's usually I was putting out all the signals, you didn't. What happened? And I'm always the one like I don't see the signals. I wouldn't say that I didn't have a low self-esteem per se, but I had an insufficient one. And I just was like, I was like, I wasn't walking around, you know, um, you know, self-negative or whatever, but I was walking around like she not interested. Like, it wasn't like I feel bad about myself so much as I just know she's not interested. And I would often be wrong, apparently. Anyway. Doc Jab, your mom and family of secular Jews. I don't know if that's the right phrasing. It's not the type of Jews most of us have ever heard about. Grandparents going to Palestine and then yeah, no, exactly. And that yeah, again, my that's why I'm saying like I don't. It took me a while as a kid to realize how rare my experience was. Like I was often confused at how many either Jews or Black people were not like what I was being raised to be. So I was like, that's but yeah, I get it. And that's also why I have never used my anecdotal experience in conversations about Jews and Black people. In fact, quite the opposite. Because I know my experience is not the norm at all. So that yeah, and I also have given a lot of grace, maybe some cases too much, to people who are critical of me based on what they think of me, of my identity, because the rarity of my experience, I can't expect them to. So sometimes I let even some personal things go. I'm like, all right, that was unnecessary. That was a little bit. But I can't expect people to, and obviously the average Black person in the United States could never be expected to assume that the Jew they're encountering is anything like my mother. And even just her, and again, I don't know them, and a lot of this is mythological for me, I'm sure, but it's also just this particular strain of my mother's family. And again, as I was taught and remembered, it created all this hostility, which is why I don't have a relationship, or part of why I don't have a relationship with any of the Jews in my family. The one I have the closest relationship to, or have ever had, was now the widow of my uncle, who wasn't even related to me by marriage. I mean, by blood. It's like I don't have a relationship with my Jewish family, not much of my Black family either, to be perfectly honest. But salute to Jamil, but so yeah. I get it. I absolutely get it. Yeah. And that's why when you read about Cyril Briggs and you read how Garvey used to go at him and his quote unquote white mama, and when you see Cyril Briggs bring his mother to court to prove that she's Black, I was like, oh man. All right. Miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I missed a lot, apparently. I missed a lot. But it's also true that the shots I did take, like I missed a lot of them too. Like that's why my memoir would be more like a track record of failures. It would be the anti Wilt Chamberlain memoir. I had 10,000 rejections. But don't get it twisted. There was no incel stuff over here, though. Don't get it twisted. None of that. And I did have my late 80s. Well, for me, my early 90s. I didn't really take advantage of it till the early 90s. I had my little light skin, I'll be sure moment until what's the point I was pointing to? Till my man did the Coke commercial. What's my man's name? When he did the singing, he walked on the bus singing that Coca-Cola commercial, and that girl looked up at him and was like, I said, it's over. It's over. Tyrese. And honestly, every time I see him in all these movies or whatever, these stupid movies he does, every time I see him, I think of it. That the moment Tyrese ended my my walk in the sun. do 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 do. Yeah, I remember that shit. I was like, you motherfucker, you. Jared A. DeBarge. Yeah, I'm 6'2". I might have shrunk a little bit in my broken back stage, but yeah. For a minute, I had the low top fade. I was in shape. Had the motorcycle, and you didn't. And again, in the early 90s, no helmet law, 18 and over, sunglasses, little fade rocking. I was a little browner a little bit. Had that Desert Storm weightlifting thing happening. Came back for a minute. I was doing my thing. So that's what I'm saying. It was, yeah, I was clean for a minute. And then, it was all over. But it's better to have walked in the sun once than to never have walked in the sun at all, right? Your voice does give black, even your translucent colored. By the way, that's another interesting thing. It's always been funny. My mother would always say, you've developed and she would call it Southern. She didn't call it black. Her problems with that the black dialect sounded too Southern. That was her bias. She was like, so she was, to her, I would sound too black, and to black people, I would sound too white. Or vice versa, it's or to have people sit there. I've been in rooms where they've debated. I've watched people debate. In undergrad, I remember there was a debate, and the sister said he's black because of how he talks, and someone else was saying no. So it's just all I'm looking for is an established rule. Let me know, if I thought it was one drop, I'm black, and I go for the black revolution, I'm team black. Now it feels like I'm supposed to be, team biracial. Just let me know what it is, and I'll find the most revolutionary conclusion. Just tell me what lane I'm supposed to be in. I would like it if we could all get on one page with that, though. I got to go from setting to setting. But just let me know. And if I'm reduced to ally, fine. I will find the most revolutionary path of an ally. It is just making up the rules. And what I really think it is, it has most to do with the person themselves. Like, what has their experience been with how blackness is defined in their life and in their family? So when people say he looks like my uncle, then I'm black. And if they're like, he doesn't look like anybody in my family, then they're like, he's got to go into some other category. But whatever the rule is, I'm gonna find the most revolutionary endpoint and be over there. So I don't, at this point, I really don't give a shit anymore. I'm good with, I'm clear what I am. Whatever lane I'm categorized in, I will find the most revolutionary conclusion and look to become a problem. Why can't we all just be beautiful? Black people that rally around ourselves will always be looking for compartments to hide into. I mean, obviously the real reason is because this is all in the context of hostilities. So that's the real reason. And that's why I keep pointing to whatever people want to identify as, they just got to find that radical conclusion and get there. Colors, consciousness, and culture. Color, consciousness, and culture. That's it, the 3 C's. All right, everybody. Look, I could literally sit here and do this all day, but I really should go and do some other things, as should probably you. There's some other streams, some other content that's doing much more substantive work than I'm doing at the moment, for sure. So please do all the things to support the platform. Thank you all very much. I do really appreciate and enjoy this, and I'm happy to come back to any of these conversations and topics again at some point. But let's all go find some other ways to be productive and contribute to what does ultimately have to be a revolution. I just want to conclude by saying again, salute to Winnie Mandela, salute to all those who past, present, and in the future will struggle along the more militant end of these liberation struggles. And yeah, and let's all be products of our people and our enemies. Peace, only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say, and it's Winnie Mandela absolutely did. And I'll see you next.
And what did you sacrifice? Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything, 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 everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.